Michael was not the kind of man who asked for much in life. He was a single dad who spent his days covered in grease, turning wrenches and trying to keep his little garage alive in a small town where everyone knew everyone. His mornings always started the same way. He would wake up early, prepare Emily's breakfast, braid her hair the way she liked even though his hands were clumsy, and then drop her off at school before opening his shop. Life wasn't easy, but he never complained. He believed hard work and love for his daughter were enough to get him through each day. On a rainy afternoon, when the gray clouds hung low and the sound of raindrops filled the air, Michael was sitting inside his small office, sipping cold coffee. Emily was sitting in the corner of the garage with her little backpack, sketching pictures in her notebook while humming softly to herself. She often stayed with her father after school, waiting until the shop closed. Though she sometimes wished she had more toys or friends to play with, she never complained. She liked being near her father, and the smell of engine oil and the sound of tools had become part of her childhood. The loud sputter of an engine caught Michael's attention. A car rolled slowly into the lot, coughing and struggling before it finally stopped near the entrance. Through the wet windshield, he could see a young woman inside, her face showing both stress and embarrassment. She hesitated before stepping out into the rain, pulling her coat tightly around her shoulders. Michael quickly stood up, wiping his hands on an old rag, and walked over with a polite smile. "Afternoon, miss," he said gently. "Looks like your car gave you a bit of trouble?" The woman nodded, brushing wet hair from her face. "Yes. It just stopped on me down the road. I managed to get it here, but I don't know what's wrong. Honestly, I'm worried about the cost. I'm not sure I can afford a big repair right now." Michael studied her expression. She seemed worried, not just about the car, but about something deeper, as though life had already placed heavy weights on her shoulders. He had seen that look before, in the mirror years ago, when he was left to raise Emily alone. "Let me take a look first," Michael said kindly. "We'll talk about costs later. Don't worry about that just yet." The woman's face softened with relief, though she still looked uncertain. Michael guided her to the small waiting area inside, the shop where Emily sat swinging her legs. Emily looked up curiously, her big eyes studying the stranger. There was a quiet moment between them, almost as if the little girl was searching for something familiar in the woman's face. "Hi," Emily said shyly, clutching her notebook. "You can sit here if you want. It's warmer inside than out, in the rain." The woman smiled warmly and sat down, thanking her softly. Michael returned to the car and opened the hood, the steam from the engine rising up into the cool air. He was skilled, and it didn't take him long to spot the problem. A loose wire and a worn-out spark plug. Nothing too serious, nothing too expensive. As he worked, he could hear faint voices behind him, Emily chatting with the stranger in her simple, honest way. "What's your name?" Emily asked, her voice curious but polite. "Sarah," the woman replied. "And yours?" "Emily," the girl said proudly, before leaning closer and whispering as though sharing a secret. "My daddy fixes everything. He even fixed my favorite toy when it broke. He's really good." Sarah smiled at the little girl's pride. She glanced toward the open garage where Michael was bent over the engine, focused and determined, his sleeves rolled up and his hands steady. There was something comforting about the scene. It felt safe, as though this little garage was more than just a place for cars. It was a home, a place built on love and quiet strength. Michael finished the repair quicker than expected. He closed the hood and tested the car, listening as the engine roared back to life, smooth and steady once again. Wiping his hands, he walked back to the office where Sarah sat with Emily. "Well," he said, smiling, "you're lucky today. It was just a minor issue. I fixed it already." Sarah looked surprised. "Already? That fast?" He nodded. "Yes, nothing major. You should be good to go now." She pulled out her wallet, fumbling slightly. "How much do I owe you?" Michael shook his head. "Nothing. Don't worry about it. Her brows furrowed. But I can't just let you work for free. Please, at least tell me what it costs. I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. Michael leaned against the counter, his expression calm. It's fine. Honestly, it didn't take much time. Sometimes people just need a break. I know how it feels when life throws too much at you. Consider this my way of helping. Sarah's eyes softened. She stared at him, almost as though she couldn't believe someone would be this generous. In a world where everyone seemed to count, every penny, here was a man offering kindness without expecting anything in return. Emily, who had been quiet for a moment, suddenly spoke up again. Daddy always helps people. He says helping is like planting seeds. One day, kindness grows back. Michael chuckled, embarrassed by his daughter's words. She listens too closely sometimes, he said, shaking his head. But Sarah didn't laugh. She looked at Emily with admiration, then back at Michael with a kind of respect that words couldn't describe. As Sarah prepared to leave, she thanked him again and again. She promised she would find some way to repay him, but Michael simply waved her off with a smile. Emily, however, kept her eyes on Sarah, watching her every move. There was something in the way she tilted her head, the way she studied Sarah's face, almost as if she was connecting invisible threads inside her little heart. When Sarah walked toward her car, Emily leaned closer to her father, tugged gently at his shirt, and whispered something he didn't fully understand at that moment. But her whisper carried a seed of destiny, a seed that would grow into something none of them could have expected. That rainy afternoon might have seemed ordinary to anyone passing by. A broken car, a kind mechanic, a thankful customer. But for Michael and Emily, it was the beginning of a story that would change their lives in ways they never imagined. The rain had stopped by the time Sarah drove away that first afternoon, but Michael stood at the garage door a little longer than usual, watching the red tail lights fade into the distance. Emily stood beside him, still holding her notebook to her chest. She didn't say much, but he noticed the way she kept looking down the road, almost as though she wanted Sarah to come back. Michael shook his head and smiled to himself. Kids could be funny like that. They formed feelings quickly, sometimes even faster than adults could understand. The next morning, life returned to its normal rhythm. Michael prepared Emily's breakfast, dropped her off at school, and then opened the shop for another long day of work. He had nearly forgotten about Sarah when he heard the sound of the bell on the garage door that afternoon. To his surprise, it was her again. She stood in the doorway with a nervous smile and a small box in her hands. "I just wanted to thank you," she said, stepping inside. "I baked these for you and Emily. It's not much, but I couldn't stop thinking about how kind you were yesterday." Michael blinked, slightly taken aback. Not many customers ever returned to say thank you, let alone with homemade cookies. Emily, sitting at the same bench with her backpack, perked up at the word cookies and ran over quickly. "You came back," Emily said with excitement. She looked at the box in Sarah's hands and added, "And you brought something too?" Sarah laughed softly and handed the box to Emily. "I hope you like them. They're chocolate chip. I used my grandmother's recipe." Emily opened the lid and her eyes sparkled. "Daddy, look, real homemade cookies." She turned to Sarah and whispered like it was the most serious compliment in the world. "You're already my favorite person." Michael chuckled awkwardly. "You didn't have to do this. Really, it was no trouble yesterday." "I know," Sarah replied, her smile still warm. "But you did it anyway, and it meant a lot. It reminded me that there are still good people in the world. I wanted to give something back." Michael hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Well, thank you. That's very thoughtful." He motioned toward the small table in the corner. "You're welcome to sit for a bit. I was just finishing some paperwork." Sarah sat down while Emily happily munched on a cookie beside her. The little girl quickly began asking her questions again, about her favorite color, her favorite animal, what she liked to do when she wasn't driving broken cars into garages. Sarah answered patiently, enjoying the child's curiosity. There was something about Emily that tugged at her heart, something innocent yet wise for her age. Over the next few days, Sarah found small reasons to stop by. Sometimes she brought coffee for Michael. Other times she brought school supplies for Emily or simply came to check in. Michael noticed, but he never questioned it. He told himself it was just her way of being polite, her way of showing gratitude. Still, there was no denying that her presence seemed to brighten both the shop and Emily's mood. One evening, as the sun was setting and Michael was cleaning up the garage, Sarah stopped by again. Emily had already finished her homework and was doodling in her notebook. When she saw Sarah step inside, she lit up with joy. "You came!" Emily exclaimed. "Want to see what I drew today?" Sarah knelt beside her and looked at the sketchbook. Emily had drawn a small picture of her father standing next to a car, with a woman and a little girl beside him. Sarah's eyes widened. Slightly. "Who's this?" she asked gently, pointing at the woman in the drawing. Emily's cheeks turned pink. "That's you," she whispered. "I drew you with me and Daddy." Michael, who was sweeping nearby, overheard and froze for a moment. His heart gave a strange jolt. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound caught in his throat. "Emily," he said softly, "you can't just go drawing people into our family like that." Emily looked up at him with innocent eyes. "But Daddy, she already feels like family." Sarah stayed quiet, her heart aching at the little girl's words. She didn't want to overstep, but she couldn't deny the warmth she felt in that moment. It had been a long time since she had felt this kind of connection with anyone, especially a child. After Sarah left that evening, Michael sat Emily down and asked gently, "Why do you like her so much?" Emily looked at him with a seriousness far beyond her years. "Because she's kind, Daddy. She listens to me. She smiles like she understands. And when she's here, it feels like Mommy is close again. I don't remember Mommy, but I think if she were here, she would be like Sarah." Michael's throat tightened. It wasn't easy to hear those words. Emily had barely known her mother, who had passed away when she was still a baby. For years, he had tried to fill that empty space with as much love as he could give. But no matter how much he gave, there was always a gap he couldn't quite close. And now his daughter was pointing to someone who had only just walked into their lives, saying she felt like the missing piece. The following week, Sarah stopped by with dinner. She explained that she had cooked too much and didn't want the food to go to waste. Michael resisted at first, but eventually gave in. They sat together at the small wooden table in the garage office. Michael, Emily, and Sarah sharing a meal as though they had done it 100 times before. Emily laughed more that night than Michael had seen in months. She told silly stories, leaned against Sarah as if it was the most natural thing in the world, and even asked if Sarah could read her a short story from her notebook before bed. Sarah agreed, her voice calm and soothing as she read Emily's messy handwriting out loud. Michael watched quietly, his chest tightening again, but this time it wasn't from sadness. It was from something else, something he hadn't let himself feel in years. After Sarah left, Emily looked up at her father with sleepy eyes and said, "Daddy, don't you think she's special?" Michael nodded slowly. "Yes, sweetheart, she is." Emily gave a satisfied smile and closed her eyes. "Then don't let her go." Michael sat in silence long after Emily had fallen asleep, staring at the shadows dancing on the wall. He didn't know what the future would bring, but one thing was becoming clear. Sarah wasn't just a customer who happened to drive into his life. She was slowly becoming something more, not just for Emily, but for him too. And yet, he was afraid. Afraid of opening his heart again, afraid of making promises he couldn't keep, afraid of hoping for more than what he already had. But deep down, he also knew that sometimes the best things in life came when you least expected them. The days that followed only deepened the bond. Sarah came around often, and every time she did, Emily grew more attached. She would slip her small hand into Sarah's without hesitation, call her name in excitement, and sometimes even whisper the word "Mom" under her breath when she thought no one was listening. Michael noticed it all, and though it scared him, it also gave him a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, the little garage didn't feel like just a place of work. It felt like the center of something new, something beautiful waiting to unfold. Saturday morning came with a quiet sky and the smell of fresh air after days of rain. The garage was closed, and Michael finally had a free morning with Emily. He made pancakes in their small kitchen and let Emily pour the syrup herself, though she made a sticky mess on the table. She laughed at the funny shapes her pancakes made, and he didn't have the heart to stop her. While they ate, Emily looked up and asked in a hopeful voice, "Can we see Sarah today?" Michael paused, his fork in midair. Things had been warm and easy lately, and he liked that. He liked how Emily smiled more, how the house felt less quiet. But he also felt the weight of responsibility. He didn't want to move too fast. Still, he found himself saying, "Maybe we can invite her to the farmer's market. It's open. Today." Emily clapped softly. "Please call her Daddy." Michael sent a simple message asking if Sarah wanted to join them. He didn't expect a quick reply, but within minutes, his phone buzzed. Sarah said she would love to meet them there. Her message had a happy tone, but also a polite carefulness that he noticed. It reminded him that she understood how delicate things were. She was not pushing. She was just saying yes. They met near the fruit stands where the colors looked extra bright under the soft morning light. Emily ran ahead, stopping to admire baskets of apples and jars of honey, then rushing back to take Sarah's hand. Sarah wore a simple sweater and a gentle smile. She greeted Michael with a warm hello and greeted Emily like she was meeting a dear friend. They walked slowly through the market, tasting samples, pausing to listen to a street musician, and picking fruits for the week. It was simple, ordinary, and deeply comforting. Michael watched the way Sarah talked to the vendors, with respect and patience. He saw how she bent down to Emily's eye level when the girl asked questions, and how she reached for Emily's hand at crosswalks without thinking twice. People around them saw a picture that looked like a family. Michael felt the thought rise and then gently set it down again, unsure if it was safe to hold. At a jam stall, Emily stared at a small jar with a bright red label. "Strawberry," she read slowly. "That's my favorite." Sarah leaned over, whispering playfully. "It's mine, too." She looked at Michael. "Should we get it for your breakfast this week?" He smiled, a little shy. "If you say it's good, we'll get it." They sat on a wooden bench to share a warm pretzel. Emily nudged between them, tearing off soft pieces, making sure both adults had their share. The musician played a calm melody nearby. Michael felt the music settle inside his chest. He didn't want to think too far ahead. He just wanted to rest in this moment. The sound of laughter, the taste of fresh bread, the feeling of belonging, even if it was fragile. On the walk back to the car, Emily pointed out little things she noticed. Birds sitting on wires, a dog wagging its tail, a baby smiling from a stroller. Sarah listened to every small detail with full attention, as if each observation was a treasure. By the time they reached the parking lot, Emily's steps had slowed. She held Sarah's hand and hummed a made-up tune. Michael opened the car door for Emily and helped her climb in. As he buckled her seatbelt, she leaned close and whispered, "Please don't leave without Sarah." He smiled softly. "We're just driving her home." The short drive was quiet in a good way. The city felt peaceful, and the soft morning became a gentle afternoon. When they reached Sarah's building, Emily spoke again from the back seat. "Can we come up?" Sarah turned, surprised. "Maybe next time," she said kindly. Today I have to tidy a bit. Emily nodded, trying not to show disappointment. Michael understood that answer. It was careful and wise. It said yes to the future without rushing the present. After Sarah stepped out, Emily slid forward in her seat until her face was near Michael's shoulder. She watched Sarah pull the door handle gently. Then, in a very quiet voice that carried more hope than weight, Emily whispered, "She's my mom. Please marry her." The words dropped into the car like a secret. Michael forgot to breathe for a second. He didn't move, didn't turn, just felt the sound of those words fill the space between them. He knew Emily remembered almost nothing about her real mother. He knew his daughter rarely spoke about that empty place, and now she had given it a name. She had given it Sarah. Sarah, still outside, paused as if she sensed something. She peeked back through the open passenger window and said softly, "Thank you for today. It was really nice." Michael found his voice. It was. He tried to sound normal. He tried to hide the storm inside his chest. "We'll see you soon." She nodded. For a moment, it looked like she might ask if everything was okay. But then she gave a small wave to Emily and headed toward her building, careful not to push, careful not to assume. When they drove off, Emily sat very still. She was waiting. Michael knew she was brave enough to hope, but also sensitive enough to notice his feelings. He cleared his throat and spoke gently. "Sweetheart, that's a big wish." Emily didn't argue. She spoke softly, as if she had practiced these words for days. "I know it's big, but it feels true in my heart. When she is near, I feel calm, like someone is watching over us. She looks at you the way people look at good things. And when she holds my hand, I don't feel lonely." Michael's eyes stung. He kept them on the road. The world passed by, houses, trees, a quiet crossing, but none of it felt normal anymore. He heard his daughter's voice, 8 small words, changing everything. "She's my mom. Please marry her." He didn't want to say no. He also didn't want to promise anything he might not be able to keep. He searched for safe ground. "Emily," he said slowly, "I'm glad you told me what you feel. It means a lot. We still need time. Sarah is our friend. We should get to know her more. We should be kind and patient. Do you understand?" Emily let out a small breath and nodded. "I understand. I can be patient. But you should know how I feel." "I do," he said. "I feel it too. The goodness. I just want to make sure we move in the right way." She gave a tiny smile and leaned back, satisfied that she had at least opened the door. The rest of the drive passed in an easy silence, like a blanket laid gently over deeper thoughts. That evening, after Emily fell asleep with her favorite stuffed animal under her arm, Michael stood at the kitchen sink and washed the market berries. The strawberry jam sat on the counter next. To the bread, he touched the jar and thought about Sarah's laugh, the way she looked at Emily, the careful way she stepped into their life. He thought about promises, how they are not just words, but shelters. And he thought about fear, how it can feel like protection, but also like a wall that blocks the sun. His phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. "Thank you again for today. I had a nice time. Emily is wonderful. Rest well." He stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back, "We had a nice time, too. Thank you for coming. Emily likes you a lot. I do, too." He hesitated, then deleted the last sentence. It felt too fast. He replaced it with, "Let's make dinner for you next week. Our place, if that's okay." Sarah replied, "That sounds lovely. I can bring salad, and I'll read Emily a story if she wants." Michael put the phone down and leaned on the counter, feeling a mix of hope and worry swirl together like paint in water. He knew what Emily had asked. He knew what his own heart whispered back. But there were steps between now and then, and he wanted to take each one with care. The following day, Sarah stopped by the garage with a small bag of groceries. "I got a few things for your dinner," she said with a shy smile. "Also, a silly question. Is Emily allowed to have strawberry milk? I found a recipe online." Michael laughed softly. "She will think you invented magic." Emily arrived after school and ran straight to Sarah, wrapping her arms around her waist in a quick, sweet hug. Michael noticed that Sarah hugged back, like a person who knows how to hold and let go in the right measure. No rush, no fear, just presence. Later, while Emily colored at the small table, Sarah and Michael stood near the open bay door, watching the sky. Fresh air moved through the shop, bringing the day's light with it. Michael cleared his throat. "I want to tell you something," he said quietly. "Yesterday, in the car, Emily, she said something big." Sarah turned slowly. "Okay. She said you're her mom," he continued gently. "And she asked me to—" He stumbled over the next words, embarrassed by their size. "To marry you." Sarah's eyes softened. Surprise crossed her face, then tenderness, then a careful calm. She didn't look shocked in a bad way. She looked honored, and also aware of the weight. She folded her hands, choosing her words with care. I don't want to step where I shouldn't," she said softly. "But I care about her, and I respect what she feels. I also care about you, Michael. I want to do this the right way." Relief moved through him like a long breath. "That's what I want too, slow, honest, kind." Sarah nodded. "Then we'll do that. We won't promise anything we can't keep. We'll just show up day after day and see where the path leads." They looked over at Emily, who was now drawing 3 people holding hands under a big sky. She added a small house and a garden and a tiny dog she wished she had someday. When she looked up and caught them watching, she grinned and waved her crayon like a flag. That night, after dinner at their place, simple pasta, a salad from Sarah, and strawberry milk for dessert, Sarah read Emily a story on the couch. Her voice was gentle, the kind that makes a room feel safe. Emily leaned against her shoulder, and the house felt less empty somehow. Michael S. The days that followed felt like gentle steps across a wooden bridge. Careful, steady, and a little musical underfoot. Michael kept his promise to move slowly, and Sarah did too. Yet even with slow steps, the 3 of them started to feel like a small team. There were tiny moments that added up: a shared laugh in the grocery aisle, a quiet ride home after school, a note tucked into Emily's backpack that said, "You did great on your spelling test. I'm proud of you." The notes were signed, with a simple heart and Sarah's name, and Emily saved each one in a little tin box on her dresser. One Tuesday afternoon, the garage phone wouldn't stop ringing. Michael had 2 cars on the lifts, a delivery of parts arriving late, and a walk-in customer asking if a quick oil change could happen right now. Emily sat at the corner table with a shoebox full of colored paper, glue, and stars. She was making a solar system project for school, and her eyes kept drifting to the clock. Sarah had promised to stop by with foam balls for the planets. When Sarah finally pushed open the door with her gentle smile and a bag of craft supplies, the whole shop seemed to exhale. "I found the perfect sizes," she said, holding up a big yellow ball for the sun and a set of smaller ones for the planets. "Also, I brought string and sticks so the planets can hang and move." Emily almost knocked over her chair with joy. "You saved the galaxy!" Michael looked up from under the hood and grinned. "You saved me too." Sarah washed her hands at the sink and sat with Emily at the small table. The 2 worked in a warm rhythm, Sarah reading the instructions and Emily carefully painting each sphere, whispering the names in order. Mercury, Venus, Earth. She paused and painted a tiny blue dot for Earth, then added a swirl of white. "This one needs to look hopeful," she said in a serious voice. Sarah nodded like this was the most important job in the world. Between test drives and tire checks, Michael glanced over and saw the picture that always paused his breath, his daughter leaning against Sarah's arm with quiet trust, Sarah listening with full attention. He thought about all the years when evenings were a bit too quiet, and how this simple sound, two voices planning a pretend universe, made the room brighter. Later that week, Emily's teacher sent a note asking for a classroom helper to guide the students during science show and tell. Michael wanted to go but couldn't close the shop that day. When Sarah offered to volunteer, Michael hesitated for only a moment. He searched her face and found the same careful promise they had, made to each other, slow, honest, kind. He thanked her and gave her the visitor pass he had picked up from the office. On the morning of the event, Sarah arrived early at the school. Emily walked a little taller down the hallway, her project held like a treasure. When they reached the classroom, children gathered around the spinning planets with amazed smiles, and Sarah knelt down to their height to show how the strings made each planet move. Emily spoke with proud confidence, and once, while pointing at Earth, she glanced at Sarah with a look that said, "Did I do okay?" Sarah nodded in a way that meant, "You did more than okay." At dismissal, a couple of parents smiled, the way people do when they see something good. One mother whispered, "Your helper was wonderful," and Emily nearly floated to the car. That evening, Sarah brought a small plant to the garage, bright marigolds in a tin bucket. "For your porch," she said. "Marigolds are cheerful. They like sunlight and a little attention." Michael set them on the porch step, and the flowers seemed to adjust their posture, like they had finally found their place. Over the weekend, Sarah painted the old waiting bench outside the shop, a soft, fresh color. Emily helped by handing brushes and adding tiny dots along the edge. The stars, she called them. Sunday brought wind strong enough to lift a kite. They carried a picnic basket to the park. Michael spread a blanket and watched Sarah and Emily run across the field with the kite string stretching into the big sky. The kite wobbled, then steadied as Sarah adjusted the line with calm hands. Emily squealed when it caught the breeze and climbed higher. Michael felt something in his chest let go of a worry he didn't know he was still holding. He saw the two of them like a picture in a nice frame. A small girl running, a woman encouraging her, a string holding them gently to the sky. When they settled on the blanket, Emily reached into the basket and pulled out a lumpy, foil-wrapped bundle. "I made these with Sarah," she announced. "Banana muffins." She said banana the way a chef might say the name of a fancy dish. Michael took a bite and laughed. "They're perfect," he said. They weren't perfect. Some were too sweet, some a little flat. But they tasted like something made with care, and that is a kind of perfection all its own. At dusk, when the kite was folded and the park grew quiet, Sarah shared a piece of her past. She spoke gently, simply. She had moved to the town after a hard season caring for her mother, who had been ill for a long time. She had loved that time, even though it was heavy because love had visited their home every day in small ways. Tea warmed on the stove, hands held in silence, the soft hum of a radio in the afternoon. After her mother passed, she felt like a room with the window open and the curtains moving but nobody standing there. She needed somewhere calmer, so she came here, found a job at the bookshop on Maple Street, and promised herself to notice small things again. "I guess that's why I like marigolds," she said with a small laugh. "They keep asking for sunlight even when the day is shy." Michael listened and didn't try to fix anything. He just let her words rest. "Thank you for telling me," he said finally. Emily reached over and took Sarah's hand in a very quiet, very sure way. Monday brought a little test. A customer at the shop grew impatient about a delay in parts and raised his voice. Michael stayed calm. explained the situation, and promised to call as soon as the delivery arrived. The man left in a rush, and the air felt tense for a moment. Sarah was there, dropping off a sandwich. She didn't speak right away. She just put the food down and stood beside Michael, close enough to say with her presence, "You're not alone." After a moment, Michael picked up the sandwich and smiled. "This helps," he said. Sarah smiled back. "Good. I'll also bring pickles next time. I hear they have magic." The week turned to another. On Thursday, Emily's class asked parents or family to read a favorite book aloud. Michael, covered in grease from a stubborn engine, couldn't leave. Emily didn't look upset. She just lifted her chin with courage and said, "Maybe Sarah can come." When Sarah arrived with a worn copy of a children's story about home, the kind of home you build with kindness, patience, and time, every child leaned forward to listen. Emily leaned against Sarah's side, eyes closed, smile soft. Later, in the car, Emily said, "That story was about us, right?" And Sarah answered, "It felt that way to me too." Some afternoons, they sat on the porch after dinner. The marigolds tilted their bright faces, and the neighborhood carried the easy sounds of dishes clinking and a dog barking somewhere down the block. Emily would draw while the grown-ups talked. They didn't talk about big plans. They talked about little things that are really big. Which bread makes the best toast, which songs help a tired morning, which promise is safe to make. "I can promise a ride to school on Fridays," Sarah said, "and I can promise to clap at every school play," Michael said. Emily lifted her pencil and announced, "I promise to eat my carrots at least one more time." One evening, the three of them walked to the bookshop. The owner, Mr. Lee, waved from behind the counter and said, "Your helper is the best thing that happened to this place. She puts the right books in the right hands." Sarah blushed. Emily chose a small book about the moon and asked if they could read a page every night. "A page a night is a perfect promise," Sarah agreed. The first real bump came on a calm Saturday. Emily was practicing riding without training wheels on a quiet street. Michael jogged on one side, Sarah on the other. For a few seconds, Emily balanced and sailed forward, bright with joy. Then the front wheel wobbled and she tipped to the side, catching herself with her hands. It was a small fall, no harm done, but it startled her. Before she thought, she looked up and called out one word that hung in the afternoon air. "Mom!" The world became very still. Michael's heart leaped, then steadied. Emily froze, eyes wide. Sarah reached her gently, knelt, and checked her hands. "You're okay," she said softly. "I've got you." She did not make the moment heavy or awkward. She just let it be what it was, an honest word from a tender place. Emily wrapped her arms around Sarah's neck and stayed there a beat longer than usual. When she pulled back, she looked unsure, as if she had broken a rule. Sarah gave a small, kind smile. "Words know where they want to go," she said. "Sometimes they arrive early to save a seat." On the walk home, no one pushed the moment away, and no one grabbed it too tightly. They let it sit beside them like a quiet guest. At the porch, while Emily ran inside to get water, Michael and Sarah stood near the marigolds. "I heard it," he said. "I felt its weight and its light." Sarah nodded. "I heard it too. I don't want to make promises we aren't ready to make." Michael's voice was steady. "We'll stay true to our steps. But I want you to—" No, it felt right, more than it felt scary. A few days later, the school held a small awards morning for effort and kindness. Emily received a ribbon for helping a classmate who had trouble with reading. She wore tea. Autumn shifted into a softer season, the kind where the air felt cooler in the morning and the light turned gold in the afternoon. The marigolds on the porch grew a little tired, but still held their color like brave flags. Inside the garage, A new rhythm lived between tasks. Michael fixed brakes and belts. Emily did homework at the small table and drew little stars along the edges of her notebook pages. Sarah stopped by after the bookshop closed, sometimes with warm soup in a thermos, sometimes with a small note for Emily that said, "I believe in you." They did not talk about big changes every day. They chose small, steady things and let those things build the bridge forward. One Saturday, the town held a harvest fair in the schoolyard. Stands were set up with crafts and pies. A local musician played guitar under a maple tree. Emily wanted to enter the pie-tasting contest, even though she had never baked a pie in her life. Sarah smiled and said, "Then we will learn today." At dawn, flour dusted the kitchen like snow. Michael sliced apples while Sarah mixed sugar and cinnamon. Emily pressed the dough with careful fingers, laughing when it stuck to her hands. "This is the mess of greatness," she announced. The pie came out a little lopsided, but the crust was golden and the apples were soft and sweet. They carried it to the fair with pride. The judges gave them a ribbon for Best First Pie, a special award someone made up on the spot. Emily wore the ribbon on her jacket and held Sarah's hand as if that had been her plan all along. The next week brought a challenge. The garage got a notice about a safety inspection. It was routine, but it made Michael tense. He wanted everything to be perfect. He stayed late, checking tools, sweeping the floor twice, tightening bolts on the lift. Sarah came by with sandwiches and found him alone under the bright shop lights. He tried to act calm, but his hands said he was worried. She set the food down and leaned beside him against the workbench. "You are good at this," she said softly. "Your shop is safe because you care. Whatever the inspector says, we will fix together." Her words did not magically erase the inspection, but they lifted the weight enough for him to take a real breath. The next day, the inspector walked through the garage, tested a switch, checked a fire extinguisher, and nodded. A few small notes. Nothing heavy. "You run a careful shop," the inspector said. Michael let out a quiet laugh he had been holding for 2 days. That night, he wrote a thank you note to Sarah on an index card and left it on her porch, tucked under the marigold bucket. 3 words, steady and true. "Your calm helps." Late one evening, Emily woke with a warm forehead and sleepy eyes. It was not serious, just a small fever, but the house felt different in the hush of night. Michael stood with a glass of water, unsure if he should call anyone. Before he decided, his phone buzzed. It was Sarah, who had a sense for quiet needs. "If you want company, I can bring gentle tea," she wrote. He said yes, then wondered if that was too much. 10 minutes later, she arrived with a small bag, tea, a cool cloth, and a storybook about a brave fox who learned to rest. She didn't take over. She stood beside them and made the moment soft. Emily leaned on pillows and sipped tiny sips. Sarah read in a low voice until the child drifted toward sleep. Then she washed the cup, set it to dry, and lingered near the doorway, checking with her eyes that both were okay. Michael followed her to the porch and whispered, "Thank you." The night air was clear, and the marigolds faintly glowed in the porch light. "You don't have to thank me for wanting to be here," she said gently. He looked at her and understood the gift inside those words. Another day, while Emily was at school and the shop was quiet for an hour, Michael told Sarah something he had not said in a long time. He spoke about Emily's mother, how she had laughed, with her whole face, and how she had once taught him to braid hair on a pillow before Emily was born. He spoke with respect and gratitude. He was not stuck in the past. He was simply making space for every true piece of his life. Sarah listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she said, "Thank you for trusting me with her story." He nodded. "I want Emily to know her mother was loved. I also want her to know that love can grow again, in a new way." Sarah's eyes were tender. "That's a beautiful truth," she said. Then she added, "I promise to honor all the chapters, not just the ones I enter." That weekend, they built a small wooden box together in the garage. It was not fancy, just smooth wood with a sliding lid. They called it the Good Things Box. Every time something kind or brave happened, they wrote it on a slip of paper and dropped it in. Marigolds bloomed again. Emily read to the class. Inspection went well. Soup on a cold day. The box filled faster than any of them expected. When Emily had a hard day, Michael would shake the box like a rattle and say, "Listen to that sound. That is the sound of good things not giving up." On a bright afternoon, Mr. Lee from the bookshop stopped by the garage with a bag of books for Emily. He found the three of them at the small table, heads close, laughing about a page in the moon book where a rabbit looked like it was hiding in a crater. Mr. Lee stood for a moment and watched the scene without interrupting. Then he said, "There is a strong wind in this room, the kind that fills sails." He wasn't talking about weather. They all knew it. After he left, Emily whispered, "He sees our team." In early winter, the first snow came quietly. Not much, just enough to draw white lines on the fence and make the street lamp look like a friendly lighthouse. They made hot chocolate and stood at the window together. Emily wrapped a blanket around herself and another around Sarah, bridging the space between them. "Do you think snow gives hugs to the ground?" Emily asked. "I do," Sarah said. "Gentle ones that say, 'Rest now, I've got you.'" A few days later, the marigolds finally faded. Their bright heads bowed, their season completed. Sarah touched the dry petals with respect, then showed Emily how to save the seeds. "We'll plant them when spring comes," she said. "The garden remembers." Emily held the tiny seeds on her palm, amazed that something so small could hold a summer inside it. Michael watched them and felt a thought take root. It arrived without rush but with clarity, like a truth that had been waiting for its time. He began to plan something simple and good. Not a big display, not a loud moment. A promise offered with care. He found a ring that had belonged to his mother, a plain band with a small, shining stone. He polished it, not for sparkle, but for meaning. He asked Mr. Lee if the bookshop could stay open 10 minutes late one evening. He asked Emily if she could draw a picture for a special question. 3 figures holding hands under a porch roof. Marigolds smiling at their feet. On the top, in careful letters, Emily wrote, "Will you join our team forever?" On the chosen evening, the air held the last bite of winter. The shop lights were warm. Sarah had just finished helping a child choose a library of first readers. When she turned after saying goodbye, she found Michael and Emily at the door. Emily wore her best first pie ribbon, even though it didn't match her jacket. Michael carried the Good Things box under his arm. Sarah smiled the kind of smile that made both of them feel found. "Are you free for a small walk?" he asked. She nodded, surprised and happy. They walked the short path to the porch, where a small lantern flickered gently. The marigold bucket sat nearby, now filled with saved seeds and a little card that said, "Spring is patient." Snow dusted the steps. Michael set the Good Things box on the small table and slid off the lid. He pulled out a few notes and read them softly, as if telling a story to the night. "We learned to make pie. We passed inspection. We made strawberry milk. We planted hope in a bucket." He looked up and met Sarah's eyes. "And there is a note we haven't written yet." Emily stepped forward with her drawing, holding it like a treasure map. "This is the new note," she said. Sarah knelt to accept the paper, her breath catching when she read the words at the top. She looked to Michael, and he was already kneeling too, not as a performance, but as a way to say, "I am here with both knees and both hands." He held the small ring inside his palm like a firefly he didn't want to scare. His voice was steady and full. "We have walked carefully," he said. "We have been honest and kind. You have become home to us. Sarah, will you marry me and join our team forever? For a second, the world went beautifully quiet. Snow fell in tiny threads. The lantern hummed. Emily held the edge of Sarah's sweater as if anchoring the moment. Sarah's eyes shone, not with surprise but with recognition, like a traveler seeing a familiar lighthouse after a long sail. She nodded, then found her voice. "Yes," she said, simple and whole. "Yes, I will." Emily's laughter rang, out like a small bell. Michael slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger, and Sarah pressed her forehead to his for a gentle heartbeat. They did not make big speeches. They let their breathing and the warm quiet speak for them. The days after the yes were not a rush. They chose a small ceremony in the spring with neighbors on the porch. Mr. Lee read a page from the Moon Book about how home is where your stories hold hands. The children from Emily's class painted a banner that said, "Welcome home." The marigold seeds they had saved were planted along the steps in neat rows. On the morning of the ceremony, the first green tips pushed through the soil like shy smiles. They stood together under the simple arch Michael had built from smooth wood, the good things box at their feet.